Homeless woman walked into a bank. Everyone laughed until the Mafia boss called her mother. The steady whir of printers and soft tapping of keyboards filled Havencrest Bank that afternoon. Sunlight slanted in through the tall glass windows, catching the shine of polished floors and reflecting off metallic signage that spoke of wealth, order, and control. Customers stood in neat lines, scrolling on phones, murmuring to one another. Everything in the bank felt clean, structured, and predictable. Just another day in Greyhaven, a city that prided itself on sophistication and status. Then the glass doors slid open. An elderly woman stepped inside, and for a moment, it was as though the room itself paused to examine her presence. Her dress hung loosely over her thin frame, faded to a murky olive shade that had once been brighter decades ago. The hem was frayed, the fabric stained with dust and travel. Her gray hair had been combed with care, but wind and time had undone its neatness. She carried a small, worn handbag, so old that the stitching at the seams threatened to break with every squeeze of her fingers. Her footsteps were slow, uncertain, yet her eyes, clear, dark, steady, held a quiet dignity. No one recognized her, though many stared. Sella, standing behind the reception counter, leaned toward her colleagues, her lips curling with disdain. "Who let that come inside here?" she whispered. Aaron, standing beside her, stifled a laugh behind her polished fingertips. "Maybe she wandered in from the shelter," she murmured. "Or she's here to ask for charity." Nara didn't bother whispering at all. She simply folded her arms, expression sharpened with annoyance. "This is a bank," she said flatly, "not a soup kitchen." The elderly woman approached the counter slowly, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from age and exhaustion. "Good afternoon," she said softly. Her voice was thin but steady. "Please, I would like to make a withdrawal." The laughter came instantly. Aaron actually doubled over, laughing as if she had just heard the funniest joke of the week. "A withdrawal," she repeated mockingly. "From where? A jar of coins under your bed?" Sella smirked. "Madam, do you have an account here? Or did you just remember a dream you had?" Nara exhaled sharply through her nose. "We don't have time for this. There are real customers waiting." The elderly woman did not flinch. She simply reached into her worn handbag and pulled out a small, faded passbook, its edges softened by decades of handling. "Yes," she said, "my account is here." Aaron took the passbook, flipped it open, and laughed again. "Look at this! This thing is older than the bank itself." Sella joined in. "She wants us to search the archives from the Stone Age?" Nara rolled her eyes. "Please, someone escort her out." At that moment, Brant, the head of security, began walking over. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and tattooed down both arms. His presence usually commanded respect, but not today. Today he carried irritation. "Ma'am," Brant said, voice firm, "you can't stand here causing disturbance. Let's step outside." "I am causing no disturbance," the elderly woman replied. "I only asked to be treated the same as every other client." Sella scoffed loudly. "Client? With what money?" Aaron raised her phone and began recording. "Oh, this is going online," she giggled. Customers murmured, some smirked, some looked away. Brant reached out and took the old woman's arm, not harshly but with the casual dismissiveness of someone removing an object, not a person. Her grip tightened on her handbag. But she did not resist. She looked around the hall, not with fear nor shame, but with disappointment. She had seen cruelty before. But here, in this room, there was no reason for it. As Brant began to guide her toward the entrance, she reached into her handbag once more and pulled out a small, old mobile phone, worn like everything else she carried. She dialed a number, no trembling. No hesitation, and just a quiet exhale. "Oren," she said softly, "I'm at Havencrest Bank." She paused. They do not remember me. Brant blinked, faintly unsettled by the tone. She ended the call and allowed herself to be led outside into the sunlight, where the warmth touched her skin but not her heart. Inside the bank, the staff laughed again. Sela. Imagine calling someone like she's got backup. Aaron. Maybe her grandson sells phone chargers. Nara smirked. If she had family, she wouldn't look like that. They never noticed the way the air changed. They never noticed the silence outside. They never noticed the 4 black sedans pulling up to the curb. So smooth, so coordinated, so quiet that even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. The car doors opened. Polished shoes stepped out, sunglasses, tailored coats, expressionless faces. Then, Orrin Calder, a name that most in Greyhaven spoke only in whispers. He walked into the bank without haste. His eyes did not scan the room. They went straight to her. The woman standing outside. The woman everyone had laughed at. The woman Brant had touched. The woman these clerks had mocked. He walked right past the counter, right past Brant, right past the customers. He stopped in front of the old woman, and his voice, usually cold and distant, softened so deeply the air trembled. Mother? Silence. Every heartbeat in the room stilled. Every smug expression collapsed. Every whisper died. This was not a woman to mock. This was Mara Ikenna, the person the most feared man in Greyhaven would kneel for. But before that moment, before the sedans, before the fear, before the reverence, there was a small soup stall by the docks, a wooden bench, and a hungry boy who had nowhere to go. And this is where the story truly begins. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us keep these stories alive, and trust me, the best part is yet to come. Now let's get back to it. The first sedan ghosted to the curb like a shadow deciding where to rest. Then a second, a third, a fourth. No sirens, no honking. Just doors that opened in the same quiet rhythm as inhaling. Inside the bank, a few customers straightened in line. Someone whispered, "Governor?" Another, "A film star?" A boy craned for a selfie he could brag about later. The glass doors breathed apart and a draft of cooler air rode in on polished shoes and unreadable faces. Brant felt it first, the shift. He had stood at the edge of brawls and behind barricades, and there was a particular quiet that came before regret. This was that quiet, settling over the marble like a sheet. The men who entered were not loud. They didn't need to be. Their suits didn't flex when they moved. They flowed. One positioned himself by the exit, one near the CCTV hub, one between the lines. Not a word. Still the room reorganized around them, the way water reshapes itself around a stone. Then he came. Orrin Calder stepped through with the kind of restrained composure that made time look clumsy. Clean white shirt, dark coat left unbuttoned, jaw set, hair clipped to obedience. His eyes were the part that stopped people. Eyes like winter morning water, clear enough to see your own smallness in. The manager rushed from a back office, face pale, smile stitched on. "Sir, welcome to Havencrest. How may we—" Orrin didn't even slow. His gaze had already found Mara outside on the sunlit steps, her silhouette framed in glass, thin, tired, clutching that old handbag like a lifeline that had learned to be patient. Brant moved a fraction to block the path. He didn't complete the motion. Orrin's eyes passed over him, and Brant felt the strange sensation of being weighed, then set aside. Not ignored, classed. Sela, Aaron, and Nara stood behind the counter in their matching blue suits, the picture of corporate polish. Aaron's recording had dropped to her side. Sela's mouth, mid-smirk, forgot what it had been preparing to say. Nara, arms folded, didn't unfold them, but her jaw loosened as though something else had taken the right to be tense. Oren pushed through the glass doors and stepped into sunlight. The heat laid itself over his shoulders. Mara turned, old eyes lifting to the face of a man the city named like a rumor. Her lips trembled. Not with fear, with relief that had finally caught up. Oren stopped in front of her, everything in him softened by a degree that would have looked invisible if the room weren't holding its breath. He dropped to one knee. Not a theatrical fall, not the clatter of armor. A deliberate, quiet lowering of height and power until he was eye level with the woman everyone had measured by cloth and dust. Mother. The word arrived and removed oxygen. Conversations cut in half did not resume. A teller somewhere in the back let a pen hit the floor and no one turned to see where it rolled. A child near the door asked his father a question and the father said, "Shh," without moving his lips. Mara blinked once, and some of the tiredness folded away. She pressed her palm to Oren's cheek with the gentleness of someone saving a miracle for when it would matter. "My child," she said. Brant realized he had been holding the old woman by the elbow. His hand opened as if it didn't belong to him. He stepped back, suddenly too large for his own skin, tattoos like maps to the wrong places. Inside, customers who had smirked now studied the tips of their shoes. One woman who had whispered, "She's probably mad," reached for her headscarf and tugged it lower, as if the cloth could count as apology. A man who had filmed a few seconds earlier put his phone away so quickly it knocked against his keys. Sella's face drained to paper. She had learned the shape of status early in life, could smell it at the door, but she had never seen it kneel. Erin's fingers lifted to cover her mouth again, not to hide laughter this time, but to keep something frantic from jumping out. Nara's arms dropped to her sides. She swallowed, the sound loud in her own head. Oren stood, not releasing Mara's hand. He didn't look at the bank's gleaming interior. He looked through it, the way you look through a window to see who is outside. "Who touched you?" It wasn't thunder, just weather that chose to be taken seriously. "I am all right," Mara answered. "I was not treated as anyone." The shadow of a frown crossed Oren's face and was gone. He escorted Mara back through the doors as though the building had been constructed for this walk alone. His men did not close ranks. They simply adjusted the air to make space. At the counter, Sella tried to shape a smile, but it cracked. "Sir, welcome. We didn't know." Oren didn't gift her a glance. He spoke to the manager instead, voice level. "Names." The manager's lips fluttered, then settled. He pointed with two fingers that trembled. Sella, Oren, Nara, and Brant. Oren's gaze skimmed to Brant, not lingering long enough to give him importance. "You lay hands on elders?" Brant, who had years of muscle memory explaining every decision, found his mouth full of bad reasons and none of them willing to be said. Sir, I was following procedure. There was a disturbance. We protect the dash. "Protect?" Oren repeated, as though auditioning the word for a part it wouldn't get. From her? Brant's throat worked. No sound. Oren turned to Mara. "Do you want this place burned to the foundation?" The question didn't land like threat. It landed like offer. The room understood the difference. Mara's hand tightened around the handbag. "No," she said softly. "I want them to learn what a bank is for." Something eased in Oren's shoulders. He nodded once, a man who preferred the discipline of restraint because someone he loved asked for it. He looked at the manager. "Your 4 are finished here." He said it not as an order, but as a sentence that had already occurred. "Effective now." Sella flinched. "Sir, please." Oren stumbled forward a step. "We didn't know." Nara whispered, "I'm sorry." So fast, the words almost braided into one. Oren's attention returned to Mara. Do you wish to speak to them? Mara drew a breath that seemed to come from years ago. She stepped closer to the counter. The three women looked like different versions of the same mistake. One proud, one panicked, one ashamed. I came to withdraw what I deposited, Mara said. Not coins. Dignity. Years of it. I have fed boys who grew into men. I have watched women barter kindness like it was a luxury. You laughed as if you owned respect. Her eyes watered, but did not spill. No one owns respect. We rent it from how we behave. The words did not lift. They settled. Selah's mouth opened, then closed. Her face turned toward Mara, but couldn't quite hold her gaze. Arin's phone screen had gone dark. She set it on the desk as if surrendering a weapon. Nara's fingers dug crescents into her palms. She would find bruise blue tomorrow. Oren gestured to one of his men. The man set a folded sheet on the counter. Termination notices printed with merciless clarity. Sign, Oren said. The manager's pen almost leaped from its cup into Selah's hand. She signed without looking at the text, as if reading would make it crueler. Arin's hand shook. Her signature broke in the middle and soldiered on. Nara wrote her name carefully, each letter a small admission. Brant didn't reach for the paper. I've served this branch 6 years, he said, voice husky. No one has ever complained. Oren's winter eyes rested on him. They didn't know who to call. A muscle in Brant's jaw ticked. He took the pen. The nib scratched once across the page. He laid it down like an exhausted flag. Mara touched the edge of the counter, fingertips grazing the cold stone. This place can be better, she said. Not to Oren, not to the manager, not even to the 3 women, but to the building itself, as if the walls had ears that listened more faithfully than men. Begin by remembering that every face is carrying a story you don't know. Oren turned to the assembled customers, his voice carrying without volume. Anyone who recorded will delete it. If you posted, you will take it down. If you cannot prove it is gone by tonight, I will know. It wasn't threat. It was logistics. Phones were lowered. A few hands moved fast. The manager dared a glance at Oren. Sir, how do we? You will issue an apology. Not to me. His head inclined toward Mara. To her, and to your clients. Publicly. Today. Yes, of course. The manager swallowed. Of course. Oren faced Mara again, the hard light gone from his eyes, replaced by the softer thing that had brought him to one knee. Do you wish to leave? I wish to sit, she said, wryness finding her mouth for the first time. And drink water that doesn't taste like the road. At once, someone pulled a chair from a nearby desk. A bottle appeared, its cap turned by hands eager to repent. Mara sat slowly, relief moving through her bones like warm oil. Oren stood beside her, a sentry who preferred tenderness to steel if given the choice. Selah watched the scene with something like hunger for a version of herself that would not have laughed. Arin pressed her palms together, a silent apology no one had demanded. Nara lifted her eyes and, for a heartbeat, met Mara's. The older woman held the gaze, didn't bless it, didn't condemn it, just saw her. Brant shifted his weight, the floorboards suddenly personal. No one was shouting, no glass was breaking, no gunmetal glinted. The room was quiet enough to hear the clock mark seconds into a future that would remember this afternoon with uncomfortable clarity. Mara lifted the bottle, drank, and set it down. Thank you, she told the clerk who had brought it, an intern with a name tag too new to be confident. The intern nodded too fast, cheeks red, learning kindness by immersion. Oren leaned toward the manager. Escort them out, he said, meaning Selah, Aaron, Nara, and Brant. They will be contacted later. For what? The manager blurted, then wished he hadn't. For whatever comes next, Oren said. It will not be easy. It should not be. The four walked together toward the doors, their reflections in the glass taller than the truth. Outside, the sedans waited with quiet patience. The city hummed in the distance, unaware that a banking hall had just been measured and found wanting. At the threshold, Sela gave one last look over her shoulder at Mara, an attempt at a word that didn't arrive. Arin wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve, failing to be discreet. Nara touched the lanyard at her throat as if removing it might loosen the shame tightening there. Brant didn't look back at all. The doors parted and sealed. A stillness remained, different from the one before. Less arrogance, more learning. The customers who had expected a celebrity or governor now understood the truth. The most dangerous man in Greyhaven had walked into a bank and bent his pride to a woman the city would have stepped around. They hadn't mocked a stranger. They had mocked the only person Orin Calder would kneel for. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe and like this video. It helps more people discover stories like this one. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, take a deep breath. Because what happens next will change everything. The smell of broth, pepper, and wood smoke used to cling to the docks of Greyhaven long before the cranes and cargo lights modernized the shoreline. Back then, the water was louder, the gulls more brazen, and the air always carried something raw and unfiltered. Salt, sweat, hunger, hope. That was where Mara Ikenna kept her little soup stall. It wasn't much. Just a wooden table, a dented iron pot large enough to feed 6, and a patched tarpaulin tied overhead to shield against the sun. The benches around it didn't match. Some were crates turned sideways, some were planks propped up on bricks. But every evening, as the light dipped and cast the docks in bronze, the stall became something sacred. Children came first, barefoot boys with scraped knees, girls with tangled hair, faces that had learned silence too early. They gathered because Mara's soup was warm, and her voice was warmer. There was only one rule, the same one she spoke every time she ladled broth into bowls. If you eat here, you learn kindness. No fighting, no grabbing, no curses. If a child forgot, Mara didn't shout. She simply tapped her wooden spoon twice against the pot. "Remember the rule," she would say. And somehow, they did. Mara's hands were always moving back then, stirring, pouring, brushing hair back from small foreheads, pressing coins into palms so tiny they had never been given anything before. She never asked where they came from. She only asked if they were hungry. Most of them were. One day a boy came who was not just hungry. He was starved. Mara noticed him before he spoke. He stood a little away from the stall, not approaching, not begging, just watching. His clothes were too small for him, sleeves torn, knees bruised from falls that hadn't been helped up from. His face was thin, cheekbones sharp like blades someone had forgotten to tuck away. And his eyes. His eyes did not belong to a child. They belonged to someone who had already seen what abandonment looked like in its final form. Mara lifted her ladle and tapped the rim of the pot, twice, the way she did for attention. The other children looked up. The boy did not. She walked to him slowly, her steps soft so as not to startle. "You look tired," she said. He didn't answer. "Are you hungry?" A long pause, the kind that holds pride inside it like something that must not be dropped. "Yes." She didn't ask his name. Not yet. She led him to a crate seat and placed the bowl in front of him. The broth was simple, rice, pepper, a sliver of fish. But when he tasted it, something in him flinched like pain. Not because it was hot, because it was gentle. He ate fast at first, then slower, as if realizing there would be more. Mara sat beside him and waited. She always waited. When he finished, she handed him a small cloth to wipe his mouth. He stared at it like it was a foreign object. "What is your name, child?" He hesitated, then, "Orin." She nodded. "Well then, I am Mara, and if you eat here, you learn kindness." His gaze flickered. "I don't know how." She smiled, not the soft kind, but the kind that rebuilds things brick by brick. "Then we start today." From then on, Oren was always there, sweeping the ground without being asked, carrying buckets of water from the pump, guiding the younger kids to sit first. He didn't speak much, not at first. But when he did, it was always short, clear, precise. He watched everything, listened to everyone, remembered details no one thought mattered. He slept under the stall roof some nights, when the rain turned cold and the wind cut through cloth like blades. Mara would drape her old shawl over him as he slept. He always woke before dawn and folded it neatly beside her door. But one night, he didn't wake before dawn. He woke to shouting. A group of older boys, dock thieves, the type who survived on intimidation, had come for the soup pot thinking Mara had hidden money inside it. When she refused to move, one grabbed her wrist. The children scattered, some crying, some hiding behind crates. Oren didn't run. He stepped between Mara and the boy with the knife. He was small, just ribs and resolve, but he didn't move. The boy swung anyway. Mara's scream split the air, but Oren didn't fall. He caught the attacker's wrist mid-swing, gripped tight with something forged in desperation. He twisted just enough, not enough to break, but enough to warn. "Leave," Oren said. The older boys laughed until they saw his eyes. Not frightened, not angry, just quiet. The kind of quiet that suggested he had nothing left to lose. They left. Mara didn't speak for a long time after they were gone. She sat beside him on the crate where he had once stared at soup like it was salvation. She took his hands in hers. "They taught you to survive," she whispered. "But no one taught you to be held." He didn't cry, but his breath shuddered. She cupped his cheek. "My child," she said. The docks were never the same after that. Years passed. The children grew, scattering into the world like seeds blown by the tide. Some worked on fishing boats, some loaded crates. Some disappeared into the city's shadows. But Oren, he didn't scatter. He gathered, not the broken, not the lost, the loyal. Boys who remembered the soup stall and the rule of kindness. Men who respected quiet strength over loud cruelty. They followed him, not out of fear, but recognition. That is how the Calder Circle formed. Whispers said they controlled the docks. Whispers said they knew every ship manifest before customs did. Whispers said a man who crossed them would not disappear. He would wish he could. But none of the whispers ever mentioned the old woman who taught the circle its first law. No theft from the hungry, no violence against the weak, no harm to those who once offered shelter. That law had a name: Mara Ikenna. Years later, when Oren knelt in the marble halls of Havencrest Bank, when his shadow brought silence and his voice turned fear into stillness, there were people who stared in disbelief. How could a man like him kneel to a woman like her? But now it was clear. He knelt because she fed him when the world would have left him to starve. He knelt because she saw the boy before the blade. He knelt because she was the first to call him my child. And some loyalties do not fade. They deepen. They anchor. They define. Now the city could finally understand. Greyhaven had not just witnessed fear kneeling. It had witnessed love kneeling. They left the bank that day in silence. No hasty excuses, no muttered insults, no attempts to salvage dignity, just silence, heavy, clinging, suffocating. Sella walked with her eyes fixed on the ground. Her blue blazer, crisp only hours earlier, now felt like a costume, something absurd on her body. Aaron kept wiping beneath her eyes even though she wasn't crying anymore. It was the shock, not the tears. And Nara walked behind them, stiff, her jaw clenched so tightly she could feel her teeth ache. The sun outside Havencrest Bank felt harsher than it should. Every sound, footsteps, car engines, the rustle of tree leaves, felt too loud. The city they had known every day suddenly felt unfamiliar. Selah's mother met her at the doorway, wiping her hands with a dish towel. "You're home early," she said lightly, still smiling. Selah didn't answer. She just sank into the nearest chair and let her bag slide to the floor. Her mother looked at her, eyes narrowing, sensing something was wrong. She sat beside her. "Selah, what happened?" Selah opened her mouth, but the words snagged in her throat. How could she explain humiliation that deep? Shame woven so tightly into her skin she could feel it in her bones. She only whispered, "I made a mistake, Mama." Her mother didn't speak. She simply placed her hand on her daughter's back and rubbed slow circles, the same way she had done when Selah was a child afraid of thunderstorms. But storms do not end because someone says shh. They grow. Across the city, Aaron sat in her room as her younger sister scrolled through her phone, her face paling. "It's already online," she whispered. "What is?" Aaron asked, though she already knew. "The video." Someone recorded everything. Her sister held up the phone. Aaron watched her own face play across the screen, laughing, mocking, pointing her camera at an elderly woman who only wanted help. She flinched. The sound of her own laughter felt hideous. The comments were worse. "This is why the poor avoid banks. She looks just like my grandmother." Imagine laughing at someone's suffering. Havencrest Bank has no humanity. May we never become this cruel. Aaron covered her face with both hands. She had filmed it because she thought the internet would laugh with her. Instead, it held up a mirror, and she hated what she saw. Nara did not cry. She sat at her dining table, staring straight ahead while her father paced the room behind her. "You embarrassed yourself," he snapped. "You embarrassed this family. That old woman could have been your grandmother. And you—" "I know," Nara said, her voice flat. "No, you don't know." His voice trembled. "We are from humble people. Your grandmother sold cassava on a roadside just to feed your mother, and you—" His words collapsed under the weight of disappointment. He sat instead, rubbing his forehead. Nara looked down at her folded hands and swallowed hard. She felt something break, but she did not reach for the pieces. By evening, the video had spread across Greyhaven, not because it was scandalous, not because it was dramatic, but because the city recognized Mara, not her name, her face. The face of the women who raised them, who fed them, who waited for them to return home. People saw their own histories in the lines around Mara's eyes. This was not just a video of disrespect. It was a video of a generation mocking the generation that built the ground they stand on. Greyhaven reacted. Elders whispered, shaking their heads. Market women slapped their chests in disbelief. Sons and daughters looked at their mothers differently that night. The city's newspapers picked it up. Influencers recorded long, emotional speeches. Religious leaders discussed dignity during morning sermons. And Havencrest Bank, the institution that prided itself on polished marble, glass windows, and a reputation of order, became a symbol of coldness. By the next morning, the bank's spokesperson released a statement. "An internal review is being conducted regarding the incident involving a customer at our Greyhaven branch. We are committed to upholding respect and dignity for all." But the city was not interested in statements. It wanted accountability. It wanted understanding. It wanted change. And the three women at the center of it all, they wanted to escape themselves. Days passed slowly. Selah stopped leaving the house. She avoided mirrors. When her mother suggested prayer, she nodded, but her hands stayed limp in her lap, unable to fold. Aaron deleted every social media app from her phone, but the notifications still came. Group chats, classmates, extended family members asking what happened. Her sister hid the newspapers out of kindness. Nara went back to the bank once, Not as an employee, but to return her ID and clean out her locker. She walked through the marble hall that had once made her feel important and now only made her feel small. No one spoke to her. No one dared to look too long either, not out of avoidance, out of shame reflected. She left quietly. Nights were hardest. Sela dreamt of Mara's eyes, not angry, not wounded, just disappointed. Aaron woke gasping, hearing her own laughter echoing back at her. Nara sat awake at her window, feeling like the city itself had turned away. None of them spoke to each other, not because they now hated each other, but because they no longer knew who they were. It wasn't just the job they lost. It was the illusion of the kind of person they believed themselves to be. 2 weeks later, Greyhaven's morning market buzzed with a conversation that had taken root in every corner of the city. How easy it is to lose kindness when you think you have risen above someone. Mothers spoke while peeling yams. Taxi drivers murmured while steering through traffic. University students debated it over breakfast plates. The story wasn't really about the bank anymore. It was about what kind of city Greyhaven had become. One where the polished looked down on the tired. One where laughter came faster than compassion. One where pride had replaced memory. Mara's silence had become louder than any speech. And as the days rolled on, something shifted. Conversations deepened. Hearts cracked open. Reflection seeded change. The city had not just watched humiliation, it had felt it. The shame was collective, not individual. And so Greyhaven began to speak, not about Mara or Oren or the scandal, but about something far older, the cruelty of the privileged. The boarding house where Mara lived sat at the far edge of Greyhaven, where the city lights thinned and the shoreline winds carried the smell of salt and rust. It had once been a fisherman's inn, painted in cheerful blues and whites. Now the paint had flaked into dull patches, the wood warped with age, and the hallways smelled faintly of damp laundry and boiled rice. Oren stood outside her door for a quiet moment before knocking. He had walked through palaces, warehouses, boardrooms where men held fortunes in their pens and power in their silence. Yet here he paused, not out of hesitation, but out of reverence. When he knocked, the door opened almost immediately, as if Mara had been waiting. She smiled, tired but warm. Her hair was tied loosely, her dress clean but faded. The room behind her was small, barely large enough for a bed, a low table, and a wooden stool. Yet it felt lived in, cared for, peaceful. "You came," she said softly. "Of course," Oren answered. She stepped aside to let him in. He sat on the stool. She sat on the edge of the bed. They both waited through a shared silence that said everything before words began. Finally, Mara reached beneath her pillow and brought out the small, worn passbook. Amy, written inside, was a dock worker's, then a fisherman's, then a boy who once swept the floors of a textile mill, then another child, and another. The names went on for pages. Beside each name, instead of deposits and withdrawals, there were notes. 1 bowl of soup, 1 warm coat, 2 nights of shelter, a blanket for the fever, shoes for work, a story when he was lonely, a place to sit when she had no one. These pages were not records of money. They were the ledger of what love had left behind. "This," Mara said quietly, "is every life I touched, and every life that touched mine." Oren bowed his head, not because he was ashamed, not because he feared, but because he understood. "This is why you went back to the bank," he murmured. She nodded. "Not for the money. For the dignity of what this book represents." She traced a line down one page with her fingertip. "These people," she continued, "gave what they had, not because I demanded, but because they wanted to say thank you. A coin, a fish, a loaf of bread, a promise. It added up, not in wealth, but in meaning." Oren leaned back slightly, watching her. The world saw Mara as someone small. He saw her as the center of the universe that shaped him. "Do you want revenge?" he asked. The question was simple. The weight of it was not. Mara did not answer immediately. She closed the passbook gently like something sacred and placed it on her lap. Her gaze lifted, steady and unwavering. "No," she said. Oren's brows lowered slightly, not confusion, but attention sharpened. Mara's voice remained calm, but there was no softness in her words now, only truth. "Revenge teaches nothing," she said. "It only continues what broke us. Pain begetting pain, pride feeding pride, violence echoing violence. I will not add another ring to that chain." Oren didn't interrupt. Mara leaned forward, her eyes meeting his, unwavering. "I want restoration," she said. Her voice was steady. "I want the dignity that was taken from me returned." Not as apology, as understanding. She placed her hand flat over the passbook. "I want respect, earned, not demanded. I want those girls to see the world differently than they did that day. I want them to learn what you learned at my table, that kindness is not weakness and humility is not shame." Her voice gentled. "And most of all, I want a chance to teach, to build again, to show that change is possible." Her hand slid away from the passbook. She breathed out slowly. "You asked what I want. That is my answer." Silence lingered. Not empty. Full. Oren was a man who had built an empire on precision, on calculation, on understanding the cost of every action. He weighed consequences the way others weighed coins. He knew the price of patience, the price of restraint, the price of unleashing force. He also knew there were few people in the world who understood the weight of choices better than Mara Ikenna. He looked at her, really looked, at the woman who fed him warmth when the world offered him coldness, at the woman who gave him shelter when life gave him brutality, at the woman who called him child when he was convinced he was meant to be alone. Mara waited, not with hope, not with expectation, but with certainty. She had spoken her truth. Now the answer rested with him. Oren drew in a slow breath. When he spoke, it was quiet, a vow disguised as a whisper. "As you say, so it will be." No bow, no gesture, no dramatic pledge, just a promise made by the only man in Greyhaven whose promises did not break. Mara nodded once, relieved, not because she doubted him, but because guiding a heart powerful enough to destroy required care. Oren rose to leave. His hand brushed the edge of the passbook as he stood just slightly. Not to take it, not to claim it, but to acknowledge it, the ledger of gratitude, the map of her legacy. He looked down at her once more, not as a leader, not as a feared name whispered in alleyways, but as the boy who once warmed his hands over her cooking fire. "I will do as you ask," he said. It was not submission. It was devotion. He turned and walked to the door. Before leaving, he paused. Mara did not need him to say it, but he said it anyway. "So the world will remember who you are." He stepped out into the hallway. Mara closed the passbook and held it to her chest. The door clicked shut behind him. And in the quiet room of a fading boarding house, Oren quietly nodded to the world he was about to reshape. The letters began arriving quietly. No signatures on the envelopes, no return addresses, just soft paper, folded with hands that had shaken while writing. The first came to the boarding house in the early morning, slipped under Mara's door like something ashamed of itself. The second came the next day. The third arrived a week later, carried by a small delivery boy who looked too curious to ask questions. Mara did not open them at once. She placed them neatly on her table, beside the chipped cup where she kept her tea leaves, beside the small vase of dried flowers she had saved from the market 3 months ago. She let them sit there like confessions waiting to breathe. Finally, one quiet afternoon when the wind rattled the window panes and the sea murmured distantly in the air, she sat, unfolded her glasses, and opened the first letter. The handwriting was uneven, hurried. There were ink smudges in the corners. Sella's letter. I don't know how to begin this. I don't know how to ask for forgiveness without sounding like I want something from you. I don't want my job back. I don't want reputation. I only want to be able to look at myself again. I was raised to respect elders. My mother taught me to greet strangers with warmth. But somewhere along the line, I thought professionalism meant being above others. I am ashamed. Not because the city watched, but because I finally watched myself. If I ever see you again, I will bow, not to your status, but to your humanity. Sella did not sign her name. She did not have to. Mara placed the letter aside. Her hands rested in her lap. She breathed out slowly, deeply, the breath of a wound loosening. She reached for the second. Erin's handwriting was neat but fragile. The letters careful, like she had rewritten this more than once. I filmed you because I thought the world would laugh with me. Instead, it showed me who I have become. The world didn't mock you. It mocked me. My own grandmother stopped speaking to me for days. She said, Erin, I did not raise you to forget the people who raised me. I cannot sleep. The laughter echoes. I don't want to be this person anymore. Please don't forgive me because I ask. Forgive me when I become someone worth forgiving. Mara closed her eyes. The sea wind slipped through the cracks in the window, and for a moment it felt as though the room exhaled with her. She opened the last letter. Nara's handwriting was sharp, precise, disciplined. I knew we were wrong even while it happened. I did nothing. I didn't laugh. I didn't speak. But I allowed it. Some say silence is harmless. I now know silence is complicity. I have always taken pride in being composed, in being strong. But dignity without compassion is not strength. It is emptiness wearing posture. If I have to start over from the ground, I will. If I have to learn humility grain by grain, I will. I am ready. Mara folded the third letter slowly. She did not weep. She did not smile. She simply sat, letting the weight of each word settle, letting remorse be heard. When evening came, Oren knocked once before entering. His presence filled the small room the way the tide fills a channel, quiet, contained, but undeniable. He sat across from Mara. No words at first. He saw the opened letters. He understood their meaning. You've read them, he said quietly. Yes. His jaw tightened. Say the word, and they will never work in this city again. They will not find a place to stand, a door to knock, a name to speak. I will make sure of it. Mara looked at him, not criticizing, just seeing him. He was still that boy from the docks, still made of scar tissue where love should have been, still fighting a world that once tried to crush him. Oren, she said gently, sit with me. He hesitated, then did. Mara placed her hand over the letters. They have broken, she said. They have already suffered. Not from punishment, but from the weight of seeing themselves clearly. Oren said nothing. He was remembering the bank, the laughter, the way they had looked at her like she was less. His hands curled into slow fists. You should not have had to teach kindness, he said. The softness in his voice was more dangerous than anger. The world should have known how to treat you. Mara touched his hand, not to soothe him, but to remind him. It did not. And yet, I survived. His fists loosened, not the kind that held wealth, the kind that held memory. The cover was cracked, the corners frayed, The pages were soft from being touched thousands of times, maybe more. Oren watched her hands as she opened it, hands that had stirred broth, bandaged scrapes, brushed hair from frightened foreheads, hands that never struck, never pushed, hands that built softer futures for those who had been given none. The first N, Mara continued, "I do not want them crushed, Oren. I want them changed." He looked at her, expression unreadable. She held his gaze, and her voice held something ancient, older than rage, older than fear. "Strength is not how hard you crush, my child," she said. "It is what you choose to lift." The words landed like stone softened by water, heavy, shaping, undeniable. Oren looked away, not out of defiance, but because the truth had reached somewhere buried deep. He hated that she was right. He loved that she was right. Both things could be true. At last he spoke, voice low. "They humiliated you publicly." "And now they will learn publicly," Mara replied, "but through work, not shame, through service, not silence. I will show them what dignity looks like, and they will learn to give it." Oren inhaled slowly. This was the part of loyalty that hurt. The part where love did not mean agreeing, it meant trusting. Even when it burned, even when every instinct in him wanted to protect her with teeth and fire. He turned his head toward her. His voice was quiet, resigned, but still edged with frustration. "As you wish." It was agreement. It was surrender. It was devotion shaped into obedience. Mara smiled. Not triumphantly, not gently, just knowingly. She reached out and lightly touched his cheek. "My child," she whispered. He closed his eyes. Yes. He would obey. Greyhaven had a way of keeping its shadows quiet, until someone tugged the wrong thread. Brant had always seemed like just another security man at Havencrest Bank. Broad shoulders, shaved head, silence that carried threat. But silence can hide many allegiances. And Brant's loyalty had never belonged to Havencrest, nor to the order it pretended to uphold. His allegiance lay deeper in the city, older, more ruthless, to the faction that had always hated the Calder Circle. He had been watching that day in the bank, not just Mara, not just the clerks, but Oren, watching the way the city bent around him, watching the stillness that followed him like a prophecy, watching the loyalty in the eyes of the men who walked behind him. Brant had expected violence. He had wanted violence, because violence would have justified retaliation. Retaliation would have justified a sweep. A sweep would have justified wiping out the Calder Circle entirely. But instead, Oren kneeling killed the plan. So Brant made a new one, and this time, it didn't require waiting for Mara to appear in the bank. The plan required chaos. And chaos is easy to buy in Greyhaven. Oren had gone back to the bank once since her dismissal. Not to beg, she knew better than to hope for reinstatement, but to return a locker key she had forgotten she still carried. She stood just outside the side entrance, hesitant, holding the tiny metal key in her palm. That's when she heard voices. Brant's voice was unmistakable, low, steady, sharp, like someone who didn't need volume to be heard. "At closing tomorrow, no real guards on rotation, just a temporary. 2 of you go in through the back. You fire a shot, just one, don't hit anyone. Panic will take care of the rest." Another voice, nervous. "And Calder's men?" "That's the point," Brant said. "They'll come, and they'll strike. And once the first body drops, we'll have cause. The circle falls. Greyhaven resets." Aaron's stomach turned. This wasn't just revenge. This was orchestration. And Mara would be the reason for the war without even knowing it. Aaron stepped back slowly, careful not to let her heel scrape the pavement. She didn't stop running until she reached Selah's door. The 3 women sat together for the first time since their humiliation. Sella's mother had brewed tea, but none of them drank it. It sat cooling, forgotten between them. Arin's voice shook as she spoke. "He's planning something." "Something big. I heard it. A fake robbery, a setup. He wants Oren to react." Nara leaned forward. Her composure had returned since her breakdown, but now it vibrated with tension. "Why?" she demanded. "What does Brant gain?" Arin swallowed. "He's working with someone else." "Another faction. Someone who wants Oren out of Greyhaven." Sella's hands tightened around each other. "So this wasn't about us at all," she whispered. "We were just part of the bait." Silence spread. The kind that doesn't ask questions because everyone already knows the answers. Finally, Nara stood. "We have to tell her." Mara listened to them quietly, seated at her small wooden table. The three young women sat opposite her, not daring to breathe too loudly. She did not flinch. She did not gasp. She did not pale. She simply listened. When they finished, she nodded once, slow and deliberate. "You did the right thing by coming," she said. Selah covered her face with trembling hands. "Ma, we didn't come because we wanted forgiveness. We came because someone is going to get hurt." Mara reached out and placed her hand atop Selah's. "Kindness begins where fear ends," she said softly. "You chose right today." Arin exhaled shakily. Nara's eyes lowered, not from shame this time, but from clarity. Mara stood, no rush, no panic. She reached for her shawl. "I must speak to him." Oren was in the upper floor of an old warehouse where the Calder Circle handled shipment ledgers and quiet negotiations. Men moved around him, but when Mara entered, the entire building froze into stillness, as though the air itself recognized her. He turned when he heard her steps. There was no greeting, only recognition. She told him everything, no embellishment, no dramatics, just truth. Oren listened without blinking. The kind of stillness that meant calculation was happening behind his eyes, fast, controlled, invisible. When she finished, he spoke only one sentence. "I will take care of it." But Mara stepped forward and placed her hand on his forearm, not commanding, not restraining, simply asking him to look at her. He did. Her voice held the weight of memory and the softness of the dockside nights where he learned how not to starve. "Do not answer chaos with chaos," she said. His jaw tightened. "He is inviting war," Oren replied. She nodded. "Yes, so do not let him decide the battlefield." Something in him eased. Just enough. He lowered his head, acknowledging not submission, but wisdom. "I will prepare," he said. Silently, she added. A ghost of a wry smile touched his expression. "As I always have." She touched his cheek gently. "My child." And he closed his eyes, not because he was tired, but because loyalty could ache when it needed to restrain itself. Night fell over Greyhaven like a lowered curtain. Brant stood in the abandoned lot behind the bank, explaining the plan one last time to the masked men he had gathered. His voice was steady, measured, confident. He thought he knew exactly how tomorrow would unfold. He thought panic was predictable. He thought Oren's wrath was guaranteed. He thought this would be the spark that turned Greyhaven into a battlefield. He did not know Mara had already moved her hand. He did not know Oren was already watching. He did not know the trap he set was closing around him, not the one he intended. Brant smiled to himself, certain of victory. In his mind, the war had already begun. He truly believed he was about to rewrite the power of Greyhaven. He believed tomorrow would belong to him. The next morning, Havencrest Bank opened like any other day. Soft hum of counting machines, pens clicking, customers murmuring over balances and transfers. But beneath that normalcy, the air felt strange, thicker somehow. as though the city was holding its breath. Sela, Aaron, and Nara were not inside. They waited blocks away, pacing, watching the doors. They had done what they could. They had warned Mara. They had warned Oren. The rest was beyond them now. Inside the bank, the temporary guard yawned near the entrance. A teller typed slowly, bored. No one noticed the 4 figures in black masks walking toward the glass doors. They entered without hesitation. No demands, no shouts. Just motion, swift, rehearsed, sharp. One fired a shot into the ceiling. The sound cracked through the bank like a lightning strike. People screamed, dropping to the floor. "Everybody down!" one robber barked. This was the moment Brant had counted on. Panic, fear, chaos, the perfect spark. But the next movement was not panic. It was silence. 4 men stepped forward from among the customers. They had not been there seconds before. Or perhaps they had. Calder Circle men didn't swagger. They didn't announce. They appeared. One masked robber raised his gun. A hand caught his wrist midair, gentle, almost thoughtful, and twisted just enough to force the weapon to drop to the marble floor without breaking bone. Another robber swung the butt of his rifle toward a teller. The blow never landed. A knee caught him in the ribs, not hard enough to shatter, just enough to collapse him neatly to the ground. No shouting, no blood, not even anger. Just precision. The robbery was over in less than 24 seconds. The masked men were disarmed, disoriented, kneeling in a row near the customer service desk, gasping for breath and realization. They looked at one another, not at the Calder men, not at the terrified customers, but at themselves. Because only then did they understand. Brant had not empowered them. He had used them. "Where is Brant?" one robber whispered, voice cracking. As though answering him, the glass doors hissed open again. Brant walked in flanked by 2 men, not Calder Circle, and froze. The scene was not chaos. It was control. Oren stood in the center of the room, calm, coat unruffled, expression unreadable. His presence alone froze the room. Brant's confusion lasted only a second. Then, recognition. Then, fear. He moved to step back. 2 Calder men appeared behind him. There was nowhere to go. The bank had turned into a quiet stage, and everyone inside knew who the final act belonged to. Oren walked toward Brant slowly, like someone walking through falling snow, unhurried, untouched. No one breathed loudly. Even the robbers stayed still, afraid to even swallow too noticeably. Oren stopped just 1 step away from Brant. His voice was soft. Too soft. "You wanted to make me spill blood in this place." Brant's throat tightened. "I dash. You thought chaos would break order." Brant's jaw clenched. "You don't understand." Oren tilted his head, expression unchanged. "You wanted war." There was no accusation in his tone, just truth. Brant's breath shook, and Oren lifted his hand. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough to end a man. Every robber closed his eyes. Sela, Oren, and Nara, watching from the street through the glass, felt their stomachs drop. This was it. The moment the city would change forever. The moment fear would swallow Greyhaven whole. The moment Mara Akena walked through the doors. She did not run. She did not shout. She simply stepped forward, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, face calm, eyes filled with a sorrow older than violence. She placed her hand on Oren's raised arm. He froze. Not because he was restrained, but because this was the one person in the world he would never move against. Her voice was gentle, but it filled the entire room. "Do not answer violence with violence," she said. Her gaze stayed on him, not Brant, not the robbers, not the fearful onlookers. "Show Greyhaven what power truly is." For a moment, the bank held its breath. Oren did not look at Brant. He did not look at the men kneeling behind him. He looked only at her, at the woman who taught him how to eat slowly, how to speak softly, how to live without becoming what tried to break him. Then, quietly, without ceremony, he lowered his hand. The room exhaled as if it had been underwater. Brant sagged forward, not relieved, destroyed, because mercy can feel heavier than punishment. Oren took a silent step back. Mara turned her gaze to Brant, not hateful, not triumphant, just tired. "Speak," she said. His voice broke. He promised protection," Brant stammered, pointing toward the masked men. "The rival syndicate. They said we could take the docks if Calder fell. I thought—" His words collapsed into shaking. The entire bank heard him. Every customer, every employee, every person who had thought this was a simple crime. The truth landed like stone. This wasn't about money. It was about power. And power had just revealed its shape. Mara stepped aside. Oren nodded once to his men. No killing, no dragging, no spectacle. Brant and the masked robbers were escorted outside, not to graves, not to basements, but to the authorities who had never before dared to interfere with the Calder Circle. Because now, it was not the syndicate delivering order. It was Mara. Word spread through Greyhaven by nightfall. Not that Oren stopped a robbery, not that a gang war was prevented, but that a feared man lowered his hand when an elderly woman touched his arm, and that the woman did not ask for vengeance, only change. Stories travel quickly in cities. And this one did not travel as fear. It traveled as awe. Greyhaven had witnessed something rare, power choosing peace. The reopening of Havencrest Bank did not come with fanfare. No balloons, no banners, no smiling photo ops for the newspapers. Just a quiet Monday morning, the kind where most of Greyhaven yawned its way into the day. Yet something in the air felt different, lighter, like the city was trying to correct its posture. The bank's glass doors slid open, and the first customers paused, not because the building had changed, but because the atmosphere had. The marble floors gleamed, but not in the way that intimidates. The staff moved, but not with rehearsed politeness. There was gentleness, patience, something human. Just past the main counters, beneath warm, hanging lights and a sign carved into dark, polished wood, sat a new section, the Greyhaven Dignity Desk. No velvet ropes, no security barrier, just a simple wooden counter and 3 chairs. Sela sat at the desk first, her hair tied in a low knot, her posture more humble than rigid, her voice softer, listening before speaking. She greeted an elderly man who approached cautiously, unsure if he belonged in a place like this. "Good morning, sir," she said. "Welcome. How can I assist you today?" The man's hands trembled as he offered a wrinkled deposit book. I don't know how to read the numbers well," he confessed. Sela smiled. Not the forced bank smile of the past, but something real. "That's all right. We'll go through it together." The man's shoulders loosened. His eyes warmed. Humanity returned in increments. At the next seat, Erin adjusted her glasses, leaning forward as a woman with a faded wrapper came to her with confusion over a lost PIN number. Erin didn't rush. She didn't sigh. She didn't glance at the queue. She listened. Because once, she had made an old woman feel invisible, and she would spend as long as it took to reverse that. Nara worked beside them, still quiet, still composed. But now her composure drew people in rather than pushing them away. A young dock worker sat before her, explaining that he had been paid in cash his whole life and didn't know how savings accounts worked. Nara didn't lecture. She explained gently, and then she asked him if he wanted help setting up automatic deposits so he wouldn't lose track. He nodded, grateful, seen. Mara moved slowly between the desks, her shawl wrapped loosely around her shoulders, her pace calm and steady. She didn't hover. She didn't supervise. She guided. A hand on a shoulder, a nod of approval, a quiet correction when needed. She did not need authority to lead. Her presence was leadership. At one point, an elderly woman entered the bank, bent at the waist, her cane tapping the ground like a hesitant heartbeat. She looked overwhelmed by all the marble and glass. Sela looked up and stood immediately. "Come, Mama," she said, walking toward her. "We'll sit." No rush. The woman's relief flickered across her face like morning light. Yes. This was different now. The transformation was not loud. It was quiet, steady, rooted. Outside, across the street, leaning against a lamppost where no one would think to look twice, stood Orrin Calder, dressed in black, hands in his coat pockets, eyes steady. He watched through the glass without needing to be seen. His men were nearby, but they did not crowd. They simply existed, like shadows cast from his presence. He wasn't guarding Mara. He was honoring her. He watched Sela lean to help an elder sign a form. Watched Orrin show a man how to read his balance without shame. Watched Nara teach a mother how to save a small bit from each market day so the months didn't crush her. He saw the world Mara had always believed possible, not one built on control, but on care. A world that could have swallowed him whole, but instead, because of her, had been shaped by compassion instead of hunger. One of his men shifted, glancing at him. "Boss," the man said quietly, "she has done it." Orrin didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed fixed on Mara. She was speaking to a young woman now, someone who looked lost, exhausted, carrying a bag that held her life in disorganized papers. Mara touched her hand. The woman's shoulders broke and she wept, not loudly but with relief. Mara held her until her breathing steadied. Orrin exhaled slowly. "She has always done it," he murmured. His voice held no hardness, just truth. The city feared him. But he feared one thing only, a life where he had never met her. Inside, Mara looked up, not at random, but as though she felt him there. Her eyes lifted to the window. Their eyes did not fully meet. Glass stood between them. Distance, the different worlds they belonged to, but understanding crossed anyway. Mara smiled, not wide, not dramatic, just gently, her face softening the way dawn softens night. Orrin bowed his head, not deeply, not ceremoniously, just enough that anyone who saw would know. This was not the bow of a man to a ruler. This was the bow of a son to the woman who taught him how to be human. The lamplight glowed golden against his dark coat. The air between them warm, even through the glass. And in the quiet of Greyhaven, a truth revealed itself. Power is not how loud we are, but how gently we choose to lift others.